This is our home. It's a land of extremes, right? From that scorching desert heat to these absolutely stunning coastlines. But deep beneath the surface and way down under the sand, there's this incredible world of life that doesn't just survive, it actually thrives. So today, we're going to explore the really unique ecosystems of the UAE, get into the science of how things survive in the desert, and talk about why protecting this precious home of ours matters more now than ever before. Okay, let's dive right in. All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the harsh realities of our environment, then look at the, honestly, superpowers of our native species. From there, we'll see what the nation is doing to protect them, understand the universal rules that govern all life, and finally, take a hard look at the challenges coming our way.
First up, let's just set the scene. The UAE is right in the middle of one of the toughest places to live on the entire planet, a hot desert biome. So what's a biome? Well, think of it as just a huge area that's defined by its climate and the specific plants and animals that live there. And this one, well, it pushes life to its absolute limit.
Let's really look at the numbers behind this extreme environment. As you can see, rainfall is unbelievably rare. We're talking less than 100 millimeters a year. The sun is just relentless, with summer temperatures that often climb past 50 degrees Celsius. And then, the temperature can swing like crazy, from scorching hot during the day to almost freezing at night. So the big question is, how does anything possibly survive out here?
Well, the answer comes down to one incredible word: adaptation. Life has found some amazing ways to cope with these conditions. Let's look at two of our most iconic residents, our national tree and our national animal. We'll start with the magnificent Ghaf Tree.
The Ghaf Tree is just a masterpiece of natural engineering. First off, its taproot system plunges up to 30 meters deep. That's like a 10-story building, but going straight down, all to find groundwater. Second, its leaves are super tiny to minimize water loss. Third, when a drought gets really bad, it can just drop its leaves entirely to save water. And get this, fourth, it actually pulls nitrogen from the air and puts it back into the soil, which helps other plants grow. It doesn't just survive, it helps its whole neighborhood survive too.
And this slide right here perfectly shows that second point. See, plants breathe out water through their leaves in a process called transpiration. So a big leaf has a ton of surface area, which means it loses a lot of water. But a tiny leaf, like on the Ghaf tree, has way less surface area, so much less water is lost. In the desert, that's an absolute game changer. Now let's see how these same ideas of adaptation work for our national animal, the Arabian Oryx. Its brilliant white coat reflects sunlight, acting like a natural sun shield. It can somehow sense rain from huge distances and will travel to find fresh green plants. It gets almost all the water it needs from the plants it eats, so it hardly ever has to drink. And maybe the most amazing thing of all, it can let its own body temperature get really high to save the water it would otherwise lose through sweating. That's a serious physiological superpower. So, nature has clearly found its own incredible solutions. But what are we doing to help? Let's take a look at the proactive conservation strategies that are being used right here in the UAE to protect these absolutely vital ecosystems. There are four main strategies in the playbook. First, we're building artificial reefs to give coral a brand new place to grow. Second, we're replanting and restoring our vital mangrove forests. Third, we're setting up marine protected areas, or MPAs. These are basically zones where fishing is limited to let the fish populations bounce back. And fourth, we're preserving the desert itself by protecting key species and making sure their homes don't get broken up into little pieces.
Now, these actions aren't just random. They're all part of a much bigger national plan. The UAE Vision 2030 has 5 major environmental goals. And what's so cool is how one single action, like protecting mangroves, connects to all 5. Mangroves store carbon, which helps with climate change. They support fish nurseries, which helps the blue economy. They protect biodiversity and our coastlines, all while being managed sustainably. You see how it's all connected? It's a perfect example.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. The survival stories here in the UAE are incredible, but they're all governed by universal ecological rules that apply to every single ecosystem on Earth. So let's break down a few of these really big ideas.
First up, the eutrophication cascade. This is what happens when too many nutrients, say from fertilizer runoff, get into a lake. It sets off a crazy chain reaction. The nutrients cause a massive explosion of algae on the surface. Then, when all that algae dies, bacteria go to work decomposing it, and they use up all the oxygen in the water. The result? Oxygen levels just crash, and fish and other creatures suffocate. One small change can cause a total system collapse.
Next is something called a trophic cascade.
It sounds complex, but the idea is simple. It's about the powerful ripple effect that top predators have on an entire ecosystem. For example, if you take away the main predator, the population of whatever it eats, maybe smaller plant-eating fish, just explodes. Then they eat all the plants, and the whole system can fall apart, all starting from the top.
All right, now this one is a little surprising. You'd probably think that the less an ecosystem is disturbed, the healthier it is. But that's not exactly true. The intermediate disturbance hypothesis shows that biodiversity, the number of different species, is actually highest at medium levels of disturbance. If there's too little disturbance, a few strong species just take over everything. If there's too much, well, everything gets wiped out. But just the right amount, like a small seasonal fire, creates new opportunities for lots of different species to thrive.
Finally, let's talk about foundation species. Think of these as the ecosystem engineers. They're the species that physically create the habitat that everything else depends on. And we've already met them. Corals literally build the reef. Mangroves build the coastal forest with their roots. And the Ghaf Tree creates a little survivable neighborhood in the middle of the desert. They're the bedrock of their communities.
Okay, so now we have to look to the future. All of these delicately balanced ecosystems are facing a massive global challenge: climate change. So what does the science predict for the UAE, and what's that going to mean for all the life that calls this place home?
The predictions are pretty stark. For the non-living or abiotic environment, scientists expect higher temperatures and even less rain, which means drier soil. For the living or biotic world, this means less vegetation, local extinctions for species that just can't take the heat, and less primary productivity. And that's a big deal. It's the process plants use to make energy from sunlight, so it means less food at the very bottom of the entire food web.
So who's more vulnerable in this scenario, plants or animals? Well, plants are what we call sessile. They can't move. They're just stuck there, directly exposed to the heat and the lack of water. Animals, though, can use what's called behavioral thermoregulation. That's a fancy way of saying they can do things to cool down. They can find shade, burrow into the cooler sand, or even become nocturnal to avoid the worst of the daytime heat. That ability to move gives them a huge advantage.
On a global scale, these changes are going to cause the boundaries of biomes to actually shift, moving towards the cooler poles and up the sides of mountains. The species that are most at risk are the specialists, the ones that can only survive in a very specific temperature range. The ones who will do better are the generalists, species that can handle a wide range of conditions and can move easily to find new places to live.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Before we wrap it all up and summarize, let's just look at one final, super critical ecosystem that brings a lot of these ideas together: the often overlooked but incredibly important wetland.
Wetlands might not always look like much, but they provide a massive amount of what we call ecosystem services. They act like natural filters for water, they control floods, they store huge amounts of carbon, and they are critical nursery habitats for tons of different species. Our very own Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary is a perfect example of just how vital these areas are. So let's recap the most crucial points to take away from all this. Number 1, the UAE is a hot desert, which has led to incredible adaptations in species like the Ghaf and the Oryx. 2, the nation is actively protecting these environments with strategies like artificial reefs and mangrove restoration. 3, universal rules like trophic cascades apply to all life on Earth. 4, climate change is a serious threat that will shift biomes, with plants being especially vulnerable because they can't move. And finally 5, wetlands are environmental powerhouses.
We have seen how our ecosystems work, how everything is connected, and the threats they're up against. Having this understanding, that's the essential first step. So the final question isn't for me, it's for you. What will be the next step to protect our home?